Good morning. Welcome to our second service during this summer season. And we're on this series called Time Keeps on Slipping. How many the summer is going faster than you thought it would? It's almost over. How many's glad your kids are almost back in school? Right? The teachers are not, but I mean most parents are like, man, I'll be glad when school starts back. But summer's almost over, really. And we've been doing this series and talking about different things. Today we're going to talk about the rest of the story, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But we've talked about Father's Day we talked about the perfect family. You know, there's no perfect family. Sometimes church holds up like, come to our church, you have the perfect family. And we don't even go there because we don't have no perfect families. And if you're a perfect family, don't go to our church. You'll mess it up. We've got a good record, 100% of messed up families. And so we're all messed up, and we already know it. But anyway, sometimes you ever buy a picture at Walmart and like you go, well, you know, I was going to put our picture in there, but that's a pretty nice-looking family. You know, maybe this could be like my extended family. Everybody's smiling. Everybody's happy. And but we talked about that a little bit. And, of course, Teresa talked about, kind of got us all down, talking about, our quiver. And our quiver has got, some of you have got like 3 quivers. Some of you got got arrows. Some of you got like 4 or 5 arrows. But your arrows are your children. And so we are supposed to aim our children at God. Help them to seek first God and His righteousness. So we're to aim our children at God, and we're to try to parent them that one day when they get old enough to make their own decision, they would choose God. Some churches do christening, baptism, baby dedication, and usually that is primarily for the parent. It's for the parent to realize, hey, it's my responsibility to try to raise this child right. And So and it's good to also realize that your time of aiming the arrows as a parent is really limited because, the first 10, 12 years, they will listen to you as a parent a little bit. After that, they start listening to their peers. So it's very important to have some other parent that your kids look up to. I remember my son, Michael, he played basketball. And, after a game, he really didn't care at a certain age. He didn't care what we thought about the basketball game. We said, hey, son, you did good. Well, he goes, he expects us to say you did good, right? You're my parents. You'll always cheer me on, But what did Mr. Moore think about the way I played? Because he had Mr. Moore as a coach. He wanted to know what Mr. Moore thought. And so it was great for us to have another adult that would watch out for our child and kind of look and kind of help direct him, because sometimes things they wouldn't come talk to us about, they would go talk to another adult, whether it be a teacher or somebody in the church or older adults. And a lot of different people was able to network with, and they helped pointed our arrows, and hopefully we done a good job. And so that's kind of, we talked about that. And we talked about how numbering your weekends from the time a child is born to the time they graduate, you got about 936 marbles. This week on Facebook, Barbie Neely said she's down to 5 marbles. So I guess after this weekend, she's got 4 marbles left with her son, and he's going off to college. She said he'd put down payment on a place or whatever, and he'll be going off to college. So she said she's got 4 more marbles left, I guess, after this weekend. You think about that, and it gets really close. If you've got a shared parenting plan, your divorce or some other situation going on in your family, you've probably got half that many weekends with your children. And if your child is 9 years old, you've only got half. So you could figure up how many weeks you would have left. And you realize the church only has about 50 hours a year with your child. So the church is going to, we want to assist you. How many believes the Bible is inspired? The whole Bible is inspired. I believe the Bible is inspired. But how many believes there's certain places in the Bible is more important than other places in the Bible? I do. See, there's a place in the Bible that said that the earth is the Lord's footstool. Well, that's great. It'd be great to let your kids know about how great God is, that this little earth is his footstool. But there's another passage of Scripture. It says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have eternal life." Now, your son or daughter may not ever hear that the earth is the Lord's footstool. But it's imperative that they learn that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should have eternal life. So, we may not be able to share the entire Bible with your child, but we want to inspire your child with the most important things. And hopefully over a lifetime, they'll learn the other things. And so we take every one of those 50 hours very serious around here in our children and our youth departments. And we're trying to build not just one leader with your child, because that one leader may not click with your child, but we have other teachers go up and teach. We do all that for a purpose, for a reason, a plan. We want, if your child, maybe it's a woman, maybe it's a man, maybe it's or somebody older, maybe it's say, well, I can't talk to my grandma about that, or I can't talk to my mom about that, but I'll talk to, Sister Linda up there, or I'll talk to Brad, or I'll talk to Jesse, or one of those, Jessica, but we want to build a network of people to help aim your arrows. So we've talked about this, and as we've talked about the thought, Reggie Joyner said, when you see how much time you have left, you tend to do more with the time you have now. And if you put a time limit on anything, you seem to find out that's the case. When you put a deadline, you start getting more serious about what you're doing. So there's a lot of truth in that. And we looked at, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Moses told us that if we will number our days, it will gain a heart of wisdom. So it's very important to look at how many days you have left, what's important. It causes you to prioritize things the right way. And so I've been telling you recently about 6 things over time. 6 things over time. One thing, time over time matters. The more time you spend with people over time, it really matters. Not just one time, but many, many times. You heard about a guy who went away in the service, and he was gone, and he kept being gone all the time, and he'd send a letter. He'd send a letter every day for his wife. And he'd send her a letter, and send her a letter, and send her a letter, and send her a letter. It was his girlfriend, not his wife. He's hoping to be his wife, and he kept sending a letter every day. And you know what happened when he got out of service? She had married the mailman. I just had to go there. But consistent time over time matters. And so when we visualize time like we did with the marbles, oh, cool, I'm losing my marbles. I got to get with it. Then we realize it takes time over time to make history worth repeating. So the more things you do with your kids over time and over time and over time, you have a history with them. And when you get around them at those special holidays, they bring up the things. They bring up the memories that you've made with them because you've made a history with them. And it's a neat little thing how time over time makes history. Then we talked about love over time is one of the main things that really matters, is love really matters. But love cannot just be spoken. Love has to be proved. You got to prove you love someone. Words alone are not enough. You got to prove that you love that person. And we realize that this verse here, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And this is the first greatest commandment, and the second is like it, is to love your neighbor as yourself. There we find that in Matthew's writing, 22nd chapter, we also found that Moses said the same thing when he was fixing to leave, he was fixing to die. He said, I just want to gather you together. And I want to tell you that you need to number your days, and you need to learn to love the Lord your God, and you need to love your neighbor as yourself. Moses was saying that all the way back in the Old Testament. So it must be important that Jesus was repeating the same thing. The real issue is love. I've been beside many people on their deathbed, and, when you really get down to it, what really matters when someone is dying is you find out, they don't want to die, and they're saying, I love God, and I love my family. And they want their family, and they want to know they got it right with God. And so the Bible's been telling us that's the main two things anyway. It's learn to love God and have your friends and neighbors that love you and you love them. They say when you come into the world, everybody is rejoicing and you alone are crying. It's according to how you live your life at the end of your life, whether when you die, you're rejoicing and everybody else around you is crying because they've lost the best friend they've ever had. And it depends on how you use your time over time and your love over time. That's what really matters. Then last week I talked about words over time. Words over time can impact someone's direction in life. And we call that the blessing. You can bless people. It came down to two things in the Old Testament. It was you have a choice. If you serve God, you're going to be about blessings. You're going to be positive in reinforcement for people the rest of your life. You're going to bless people, and you're going to bless them, and they're going to bless their kids, and they're going to bless their kids. Or you can choose to serve the devil, and you're going to be a part of cursing, and you're going to curse yourself and your family, and you're going to curse your kids, and your kids are going to curse their kids, and it's going to go to the second, third generation. It's up to you. And, we found that Joshua said, for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. He made a decision. For me and my house, we're going to be a part of the blessings. And Moses said, you got to choose. You want the blessings, you want the curses. And so we found out words very important. We started looking at Jacob and how Jacob didn't have the blessing because he sold his birthright for stew. Not just any stew, but any more hearty meals. Thick and wonderful. So thick you could eat it with a fork, but you want to eat it with a spoon because it is so delicious. Remember that? So he sold his birthright for some stew. You got to watch last week if you didn't see it. And he didn't get the birthright. And because he didn't get the birthright, something was missing in his life. He wanted his father's approval. He wanted his father's acceptance. So when his other brother that wasn't supposed to be blessed got blessed, he found out that, maybe my dad didn't bless me because I don't have the right women in my life. I already had 2 women. And so he decided to get him another woman. How many knows if one woman's not good, 2 would be better, and if 2's not good, get 3 or 4, right? Well, that's what people think when they're cursed. And so Jacob, he got him some more women. And he worked one time 7 years, and he got the wrong woman, and she was ugly. How many's in here? Don't raise your hand. No, don't go there. How many know somebody that did that? But then he worked 7 more years for a beautiful woman. It's not all bad. Sound like a country song, right? So he worked 7 more years. And yet, Jacob, he continually wanted the blessing of the Lord. I mean, he wanted the blessing of his dad. He finally went away and he became a very high achiever. He worked, 14 years for the woman of his dreams. And he seemed like a day. It's because he's in love, And so that didn't do what he needed to do. And he made money and he had this and that and the other. And all he really wanted to do is eventually go home. He wanted to go back home. You really make something out of yourself, but nobody around you really cares because they don't know where you came from. He wanted to go home and let people go, hey, you may not have blessed me, but I blessed me. How do you like me now? See, another country song. How do you like me now? And a lot of people have that desire. They want to go home and say, hey, you don't want to go to your, people, if they're ever going to go on a diet in their entire life, they're going to go on it before they go back to their school reunion, right? It's like, hey, you remember you rejected me? How do you like me now, right? And they go, yeah, but I saw you on Facebook 6 months ago. People want the blessing. And we find out that Jacob so craved it. I love to hear y'all's thoughts after I preach because some of you come up with better stuff than I even thought of. And my brother, he was telling me after service, he said, when Jacob, the one that needed the blessing, didn't have the blessing, wanted the blessing, instead of giving his blessing to the firstborn, he lined all his 12 sons up and he blessed them all. Because he understood like nobody else what the lack of a blessing really felt like. Then later we read the part where they had brought in, and then, he crossed his arms, and the right arm to the first son and the left arm. But he crossed his arm, and they undone it like he didn't know what he was doing. He's an old man, didn't want it, but he did it anyway. And my brother said after service, he said, when you said that, the thought came to me, the blessings comes at the cross. And he's so right. Our blessing comes at the cross of Jesus Christ. That's so true. So words can impact people for either positive direction in their life or negative direction in their life. And so we want to make sure that we expand our vocabulary and we learn the words that people need to hear in their life. And some of your kids, they love you, but their personality is to do works for you. And, you got to understand some kids are more loving than others, but others are loving you in a different way because they're doing a work for you. They'll fix something or do something, and it's just a difference in their personality. But you need to learn your child's love language and your wife's love language, and you need to use the vocabulary that they need to hear. Today we're talking about stories. Stories over time move us to imagine a world beyond ourselves. Stories are amazing. All right, I want you to, everybody's got a thumb, right? I want you to turn your thumb up, lift your thumb up, okay? All right, that means I'm doing good. So you go like that. You're doing good, Pastor. And then if I'm not doing good, do like that, okay? All right, I'm going to tell you some stories today. I love stories. And if you think it's a good story, then I want you to go like that. If you don't think the story's going to work out right, I want you to go like that, okay? All right, I want to tell you this story about this guy. There was this guy one time. He was trying to impress this woman. And so what he did, he gave her a bracelet. How many think that's good? All right. And then he gave her some perfume. All right. Looks like you got it. Okay, you got it. All right. He gave her a perfume, and he gave her a bracelet. And so now let me ask you this. But what if I told you more of the story? What if I told you he regifted the bracelet? Okay, some people don't like the regifting thing. He regifted the bracelet. All right, what if I tell you that the perfume bottle was not full, it was partly used? Okay, so they don't like that. I wish I wouldn't have done that now. That wasn't me. But here's the thing. I'm not going to tell you any more of that story because you don't like it. I'm going to tell you another story. Because stories are very impactful. One time there was this old Indian. He lived and worked with a king who loved hunting. One day he went hunting with this great doctor. While hunting, the king was pricked by a strange plant on his middle finger. The finger became swollen and painful, and the doctor applied a special ointment to the wound and bandaged the king's finger. The king then asked, "Will my finger be all right?" And the doctor answered, "Good, bad, I don't know." I mean, he's got a doctor like that right now. That's what I figured. A few days passed, and the king's finger began to be worse. He summoned the doctor and asked, "Will my finger be all right?" Doctor goes, "Good, bad, I don't know. I really don't know." A few days later, the king's finger was so badly infected, it has to be amputated from his hand. The king was so furious, he ordered the doctor to be jailed and hanged in a month's time. Meanwhile, after a little time of recovery, the king went hunting again. This time, he has more misfortune. He was captured by a cannibal tribe. Before the tribe, this tribe, they are going to burn him as a human sacrifice. But then the priest noticed that he only had 9 fingers. And it was a tribal belief that the person had to be perfect in body. And so he was missing a finger. And the priest said, "You cannot offer him as a sacrifice." And so they released the king. Back to the kingdom, the king immediately ordered the release of the doctor. Then the doctor wanted to know what was going on when he was summoned by the king. And the king said, "Great doctor, because of you, I lost my finger. But in turn, it saved my life. And I just want to thank you. And I appreciate you so much. The doctor said, good, bad, I don't know. I don't know if it was good or bad, great king. Here, if not because of you putting me in jail, then I would have been on the hunting trip with you like I always do. And if I would have been there with you and I would have been captured by the tribe, I would have had 10 fingers and I would have been sacrificed. So he said, good, bad, I don't know. How many stories are like that in our own life where we're in the middle of a story, but we don't know all of it? It's like Jonah. We turn in the Bible, and the Bible's got fascinating. There's 66 books, and there's hundreds of stories, and sometimes we just get the middle of the story. We don't get the whole story. We turn to Jonah, and we find out Jonah is a guy, and God asked him to go to Nineveh. And Jonah goes, I don't want to go to Nineveh. God says, well, I want you to go to Nineveh. And Jonah said, I don't want to go to Nineveh. Matter of fact, I'm going to go down to the seaside, find my lost shaker salt. And so he goes down to the seaside. He went down to Joppa. That's not the direction God told him. It's actually the absolute opposite direction that God told him to go. He goes down to Joppa. He goes down to where they have the ships at. He goes down and he gets on one of the ships. And he goes down in the ship. Well, then there's a storm comes up. When the storm comes up, they're figuring, well, we know weather and we know, something's wrong. There's something bad here on the ship and someone's caused us to kind of be cursed. And the only person that's different on this boat is Jonah. And so they say, we're going to throw Jonah out of the ship. So they throw Jonah out of the boat and he goes down in the water. And then he's swallowed by a great fish, which is believed to be a whale. He's swallowed by this whale and he goes down in the well. And then the whale goes down deeper in the water. Now, you've heard of people eating bad fish and they get sick and they throw up, right? But here's a fish that ate a bad person, and the fish couldn't take it anymore, and he goes up on this shoreline and he throws up. Sorry, y'all fixing to go to lunch, but he threw up, and there Jonah came out. Now, you go, well, that's not a very merciful God, but there's only 2 ways out of a fish, and that's pretty merciful. You got to admit. And that's what we learn from the story. And so in this story, he comes out of this fish's belly, and now he's all bleached white. And it just so happens in Nineveh, their God is the fish god. And so here's this ghostly-looking white fella coming out of this fish, and he goes, I just want to tell you, you better all repent because you're going to all die. And the whole city repents. That's a little story about a disobedient guy that saves an entire town. That's a wonderful story, ain't it? That's a great story. Can you imagine some of the stories that you tell your kids? Starting off when they're little babies, like, rock-a-bye baby in the treetop. Why do you put a baby in the treetop for? That's just stupid. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. And then the bow breaks, and the baby comes down, baby and all, cradle and all. And that's supposed to be comforting to your baby? What kind of parents are y'all? Or what about getting your kids, they get a little bigger, and you go, ring around the roses, a pocket full of posy. And then they all fall down. That's a story about the kids getting a disease and they all die. And that's what you want to tell your kids. I know what the thing is. You tell your kids stories like that and they're about to go to bed and they go, please, Mommy, please, Daddy, don't tell me a story and maybe I can go to sleep tonight. What about the 3 bears? The little girl goes to look. She's got a perfect little room, a perfect little house. These 3 bears, they call them little bears, but there must be some big bears because there's a daddy bear and a mama bear and a baby bear. They come in her house and ramshack her house. They break her chair. They sleep in her bed. They eat her food. That's supposed to be a good story. I'm telling you, we got some messed up people. The 3 pigs, I'm going to tell you. And they always start out, once upon a time. There's nothing that ever happens just one time. It's going to happen more than once. It's kind of like the Old Testament. The Old Testament is just messed up. I am glad that we don't just have the Old Testament. The Old Testament is messed up. Even their star players are messed up. Like David committed adultery, killed somebody. Abraham lied. You know, all of them, they're just all messed up. And it starts out, so-and-so lived so long, and then they died. And so-and-so lived so long, and they died. And then so-and-so long, they died, and they died, and they died, and they all died. The Old Testament is just messed up. Then it gets to the New Testament. I'm glad we get to a new covenant, a New Testament, and it starts, and it says, and so they begot so-and-so. In other words, they were born, and 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 they were born. These people kept being born. Everybody loves births, right? The New Testament starts out a whole new, that you can be born again. New Testament's exciting. The New Testament's more about the blessings. The Old Testament's more about the curses. It kind of reminds me of America. The old world told those old creepy stories and nursery rhymes. The new world, we tell a lot better stories, don't we? We go, once upon a time. And we tell these beautiful little stories. We may have a villain, but the villain never wins, right? In our new stories. And what's the last line of all our great stories today? They lived happily ever after. And I love that. And because I believe that we originally was a nation founded on God. And I think we did believe and we understand that God is a sovereign God. And no matter what we go through as a people, as a family, as a nation, eventually it's going to come out all right because in God we trust. I believe that. This story about Jacob kept wanting God. He kept wanting favor. He kept wanting. We find that Jacob, he gets to this place, and Jacob is running from he's told his brothers, Esau's birthright, and Jacob lays down in a night near Luz, and he was dreaming, and he had a vision of a ladder and a stairway in between heaven and earth. And God's angels were on it, ascending and descending. He was being able to talk with God. And Jacob saw God standing above the ladder, and God repeated the promise of support he had made to Abraham and Isaac. He told Jacob his offspring would be many, blessings, all the families of the earth, God said. And here's what Jacob realized. That's what he wanted his whole life. He wanted the approval of a father. He wanted to know he's all right with God. He didn't know that's what he needed the most, but that's what he needed. And so Jacob said, God said, behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Genesis 28:15. When Jacob woke, he believed that God was present where he was at. He felt God's presence. He took the stone that he had been using to rest his head, and he poured oil on it, and he consecrated it to God. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, I will give, and he'll give me bread, and he'll give me to eat and clothing to wear, so that I'll come again to my father's house. See, he's still craving. He said, I'm going to get to go back to my father's house. And I can go back to my father's house in peace. Then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I've set up for a pillar, shall be called the house of God. And of all that you give me, I will give you a full tenth back to you. See, this is when Jacob really got right. This is when Jacob, he sent his family on ahead, and they had certain things he had stolen. He had flocks and he had animals. And he said, if Esau gets there, he's going to be looking for me. He's going to want to kill me. But he said, I want you to take these flocks, and I want you to take these animals, and these are going to be gifts to Esau and my people. And then so what did Jacob do? Jacob did what we've learned that you need to do. He got things right with God, and he got things right with the people around him. He made restitution. He loved his neighbor. He loved his friend. Everybody he'd ever done wrong to, he tried to make it right. And what did it do? It gave Jacob favor. It gave Jacob favor, and he felt the presence of God, and he could communicate with God again, and things started turning around in his life, and it was powerful. And you know, the beautiful thing about this ladder, this connection between heaven and earth, God taking the initiative to reach down to man, this perfect ladder is actually Jesus Christ, who was God come to this earth to save humanity. Jesus refers to himself as a ladder in John 1:51. And Jesus said to him, "Truly, truly, I say unto you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." Jesus was the ladder that Jacob saw. Even in the NIV translation, it says stairway is used instead of ladder. The word ladder appears in the King James Version, the New King James Version, the English Standard Version, the New American Standard Version. Jacob vowed to give 1/10 of his income to God's work. What is Jacob doing? He's getting right. He said, you know, I realize all the blessings I got has come from you. Anyway, everything I got came from you. So I'm going to give you 10% back, and it's going to keep me reminded that you gave all that I've got. He made things right with his neighbor. He made things right with his God. And it was very powerful. And see, the contrast that Genesis is trying to make, if you get right with God and you get right with your neighbor, you can touch God. You can communicate with God again. But he's saying if you don't, if you think you can do it on your own, what you get is the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel was some people that thought they could reach heaven without God. They thought they could build their own system to heaven, but it never works. It always falls. It always is divisionary. It never works, and it never will. Jacob finally got things right, and he found the right way to heaven. He found the right way home. You know, he did it right. Eventually, he did it right. And I want you to do it right because I want your story. But here's what I want to tell you about the New Testament story. No matter where you're at in your story, the ending. We're going to do this thing in the fall called journaling. We're going to be journaling, and we're going to have you journal stuff that you get from the message, and I want you to journal. But there's a place in the very back I want you to go ahead and write in, and here's what you to write at the end of your journal. Because at the end of the journal, I'm not a prophet, but I already know the ending of your journal. And at the ending, and it says, and if that person knows Jesus Christ, they lived happily ever after. They live happily ever after. That's if they know Jesus Christ. See, I want to give you the rest of the story about the guy that was trying to, you know, he's trying to get on the good side of this woman, and you didn't like the way he was doing it. I know this school teacher named Miss Thompson. Every year when she met her new students, she would say, "Boys and girls, I love you all the same. I have no favorites." Of course she had favorites. She had favorites, and to be truthful, she had some students she just didn't like. Teddy Stollard was one of those boys Miss Thompson just didn't like, for good reason. He just didn't seem interested in school. There was a deadpan, blank expression on his face. He was kind of glassy, unfocused in his appearance. When she spoke to Teddy, he always answered in, just slurs and monosyllables. His clothes were musty and his hair was unkempt. He wasn't an attractive boy, and certainly wasn't likable. So when she took a chance to mark on Teddy's paper, she always did it with a red flare, and she made big X's and big F's because she really didn't like Teddy. But she should have knew better. She had his records, and his records read like this. First grade, Teddy shows promise with his work and attitude, but he's got a poor home situation. Second grade, Teddy could do better. Mother's seriously ill. He receives little help at home. Third grade, Teddy is a good boy, but too serious. He's slow to learn. His mother died this year. Fourth grade, Teddy is very slow, but well behaved. His father shows no interest in him. Well, Christmas came, and the boys and girls in Miss Thompson's class brought her Christmas presents. They piled their presents on her desk and crowded around to watch her open them. Among the presents, there was one from Teddy Stollard. She was surprised that he had even got her a gift. Teddy's gift was wrapped in a brown paper sack, held together with a lot of Scotch tape. On the paper were written the simple words, for Miss Thompson from Teddy. When she opened Teddy's present, out fell a gaudy rhinestone bracelet with most of the stones missing, and a half-empty bottle of cheap perfume. The other boys and girls began to giggle at Teddy's gift, but Miss Thompson at least had enough sense to silence them by putting the bracelet on and putting a little perfume on her wrist. She said, "Doesn't it smell lovely?" And the children, taking their cues from the teacher, began to ooh and ah. At the end of the day, when the school was over and the other children had left, Teddy lingered behind, and he slowly came over to her desk and said softly to Miss Thompson, "Miss Thompson? Hey, Miss Thompson, you smell just like my mother. And her bracelet looks really nice on you. I'm glad you like my presents." When Teddy left, Miss Thompson got down on her knees and she asked God to forgive her. When the children came back to school, they were welcomed by a new teacher. Miss Thompson had become a different person. She was no longer just a teacher. She had become an agent of God. She was now a person committed to loving her children, doing things that would live on after her. She helped all her children, but especially the slow ones like Teddy Stollard. By the end of the school year, Teddy showed dramatic improvement. He had caught up with most of the students and even ahead of some. She didn't hear from Teddy for a long time. Then one day she received a note from him. "Dear Miss Thompson, I wanted you to be the first to know I'll be graduating second in my class. Love, Teddy Stollard." 4 years later, another note came. "Dear Miss Thompson, they just told me I will be graduating first in my class. I wanted you to be the first to know. The university has not been easy, but I like it. Love, Teddy Stollard." 4 years later, another note came. "Dear Miss Thompson, as of today, I am Theodore Stollard, M.D. How about that? I wanted you to be the first to know I'm getting married next month, the 27th to be exact. I want you to come and sit where my mother would have sat if she were alive. You are the only family I have now. My dad died last year. Love, Teddy Stollard." Miss Thompson went to that wedding and sat down where Teddy's mother would have sat. She deserved to sit there. She had done something for Teddy that he'd never forget. Now, how many would like to change your down to an up? I would. See, we can judge other people's gifts until we figure out where they came from. That was not a very inspiring gift, but it came from the right place, the heart. I got a feeling God's looking for people in the congregation that's willing to give the right gift. And the right gift may not be the gift that everybody else likes, but God sees where the gift comes from. And see, the rest of the story, if we only understood that everybody has a story, and some of us started at different places. And you may say, "Well, you're not very far along," but if you could see where God brought me from, then you would know why I love him so. And sometimes we judge people because we're putting their story in our story. They're not where we're at. And we find this. The thing we have to settle is God is a good God. He's writing your story. Maybe we should surrender our pen to God and let him write the story. Is God good when the outcome is not? I believe he is. During the famine as well as in the feast, at some point we will all stand in this intersection. This answer, the definite answer comes to a person of Jesus Christ. He is the only picture. Jesus is the only picture of God that's ever been taken. Do you want to know heaven's clearest answer to the question of when things don't go right in life, when you go through suffering in life? Then we need to look at Jesus. Jesus, he pressed his fingers into the sore of a leper. He felt the tears of a sinful woman who wept. He inclined his ear to the cry of the hungry. He wept at the death of a friend. He stopped his work to tend to the needs of a grieving mother. He doesn't recoil. He doesn't run or retreat at the sight of pain. Just the opposite. He didn't walk the earth as in an insulated bubble or preach from an isolated, germ-free, pain-free island. He took his own medicine. He played by his own rules. Jesus felt them. Cruel accusations were made from jealous men. Jesus knew their sting. He seemingly, we find that he was a sinless man, but he died a senseless death. Just look at the cross. He exacts nothing from us that he did not experience himself. Why? Why? Because God is good. God is good. God owes us no more explanations than this, than the fact that he's good. Besides, if he gave us one, what makes us think that we would understand it? Might the problem be less God's plan and more our limited perspective of God's plan? Out of all his creations, how much have we actually seen? And of all the work that God has done, we only see a sliver, a little doorway, a little peephole. Is it possible that some explanation for suffering exists, but we yet don't know it? Is it possible that the wonder of heaven will make the most difficult things in life a good bargain? This was Paul's opinion. Paul said our light difficulty, our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Suppose I invited you to this island, and there was this island, and at this island there was no sorrows at that island. There was no separation at that island. There was no sickness at that island. There was nothing on this island but joy. And I made only one stipulation. Would you be willing to go through 1 millisecond of discomfort to be on that island? How many says I would do it? But folks, if we live to be 80, 90, 100 years old, in light of living through eternity, this that we suffer here is but a millisecond in the eyes of God. For what's ahead of us, he compares this life to but a vapor, just a finger snap compared to heaven. Your pain won't last, but you will. Whatever we may have to go through now is less than nothing compared with the magnificent future God has in store for us. God's finished work. Let the composer complete his symphony before you judge it. The forecast is simple. Good days, bad days. We don't know. But God is in all our days. He is the Lord of the famine. He's the Lord of the feast. And he uses both to accomplish his will. If I were to show you this thing right here, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Philippians 4:4. You say, well, that verse doesn't, who is he to say that? Rejoice. Yeah, he just rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. It'd be better if he said rejoice on every day but Monday. Or rejoice, sometimes. But no, Paul has to be Mr. Smarty Pants, and he has to say, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. What does he know? But until you see the rest of the story, maybe he knows more than we think he knows. The rest of the story is he wrote that while he was in jail, and he had been in jail for 2 years. Now read it. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. See, when we get to the rest of the story, it tells something new. What about Joseph? Joseph, he went in the pit. His brothers threw him in a pit. They was going to kill him, but they didn't kill him. They threw him in the pit. Was that good? Is that thumbs up or thumbs down, guys? We don't know, right? It could have. He didn't stay in the pit. Somebody took him out. They sold him, and he went to where? He went to a palace. That's good. But there at the palace, a woman accused him of trying to rape her, and he went to the prison. That's bad. No, in the prison, he met the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. And there come a time they needed someone to interpret visions. And guess what? He went back to the palace again. See, we don't know. It's where you want to read the story at. It's wherever you're in your story. But I guarantee you one thing, your story's not over. God's not finished. And at the end of the story, there's going to be these words that God is going to say, and they lived happily ever after. By the blood of Jesus, we only have one ending to all of our stories, and that's we're going to live forever, forever happily ever after.